When the world leaders, diplomats, campaigners, and scientists descend on Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt next week for talks on tackling climate change, don't expect them to part the Red Sea or other miracles that would make huge steps in curbing global warming. Each year, there are high hopes for the 2-week United Nations climate gathering and, almost inevitably, disappointment when it doesn't deliver another landmark pact like the one agreed in 2015 in Paris. But those were different days as marked by a spirit of cooperation between the world's two biggest polluters, the United States and China, as well as a global realization that failure to reach an agreement would put humanity on a self-chosen track to oblivion. This November, the geopolitical tides have shifted. A devastating war in Ukraine, skyrocketing energy and food prices, and growing enmity between the West on one hand and Russia and China on the other make for difficult conditions at a gathering that requires cooperation and consensus. Scientists are more concerned about global warming than 3 decades ago, when governments first came together to discuss the problem, because the pace of warming in the past decade is 33% faster than in the 1990s.
And I think this COP should be about our values. 1.5 degree is a value for us. Because every nation deserves to survive this climate crisis.
Unfortunately, my real expectations going there are very low, because we see very limited progress. We have a geopolitically very challenging situation in the world with the Ukraine war, with the economy moving into recession, inflation levels rising, trust levels being at a very low level. And as we know, climate action requires trust and collaboration among all countries in the world. So I'm really worried coming to COP27.
Recent forecasts have that down to 2.5 degrees Celsius thanks to measures taken or firm commitments government have already made. That's far above the 1.5 degrees Celsius limits country agreed to 7 years ago. However, the time for keeping that target is fast running out. Prices for oil, coal and natural gas have jumped since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Some countries have responded by trying to tap new sources of fossil fuel. This has raised concern about governments backsliding on their commitments to cut emissions, including the agreement at last year's climate talks to phase down the use of coal and sharply reduce the amount of methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas and is released into the atmosphere. At the same time, rising fossil fuel prices have made renewable energy more competitive. Building solar and wind power plants remains more expensive for developing countries though. To help them cut their emissions quickly, rich nations are negotiating aid projects known as Just Transition Energy Partnerships or JETPs with several major emerging economies including Indonesia and India that could be finalized during or shortly after COP27. Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg is not coming to this year's gathering and recently called the UN process a scam. Other activists have also voiced frustration at the slow process of negotiations given the scale of the threat posed by climate change. The gathering in Egypt will be the first time since 2016 that UN climate talks have taken place in Africa. Experts say it is important the continent gets more attention given how heavily it is affected by rising temperatures. Campaigners say that recognizing the challenges Africa faces and prioritizing the needs of vulnerable countries is essential for a successful outcome this year.